Okay, Be'ezrat Hashem. So now we start the Pirush, the explanation of the Malbim on Pasuk Yudbet. Okay, we said the Pasuk says, Hanitzanim nir'u ba'aretz, right? By the way, I just this shiur, okay, I want to dedicate it to the refuah shelema of a dear friend of the wife of a dear friend of mine, who's going through surgery right now as we speak. Yafa bat simcha. שיהיה לה רפואה שלמה ובשורות טובות, ויקוים בה ורפוא ירפא, הנותן רשות לרופא לרפות.
אמן.
טוב, הניצנים נראו בארץ, so the blossoms are seen on the earth, right? On the land. עת הזמיר הגיע, the time of pruning has come, וקול התור, and the song of, or the voice, the sound of the turtle dove, nishma ba'aretz, is heard in the land, on the land. Nishma ba'aretzenu, on our land. Sorry. The Malbim takes a little bit of a different approach than the Gaon Mivina. He says the following. He says the Nitzanim are the blossoming or the influence of the effort a person does when he's on a high. Everyone has at times time of inspiration, time of growth, time where he wants to be a big tzaddik, where he wants to do the things right, when he wants to fix everything. But that time never really lasts, or forever, for no one. So you have times of high, and like we said that we brought it in the pasuk, right? The winter goes and the cold goes and the geshem, chalaf halach lo, right? So you have times of down. During those times, there are also aspects of nitzanim, that there's also some types of blossoming, and we're going to see what that means. He says the Malbim, in order to understand the blossoming, the effort, the influence of the effort, we need to understand where does the inspirational growth at the time of a high comes from. A person has these highs. Where do they come from? So he says there are two inspirational sources in a man. You have what is called the neshama. The neshama is the soul. What defines you, what identifies you, what gives you a purpose in life, your true self. That is called the neshama. And that neshama stays with you all the time. All the time. Obviously, we know that depending on how much you tap into that neshama, into that power, into that effort, into that essence, this will determine how spiritual you are and how often you're on a high. That's one source. He says, and then there is another source. There is what is called the Hayya and the Yehidah. The Hayya and the Yehidah are the two levels, spiritual levels, that a man can only benefit from if he connects to that source. It's higher than the Neshama. So you have the Nefesh, which is the lowest. Then you have the Ruach. Then you have the Neshama. These three are consistent, right, to your identity. And then you have the Hayya Yehidah. The Hayya is a higher level of the neshama, and then the yehidah is the point of origin of your neshama, right? It is what is the closest to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will at the origin to create the creation of the world and humanity and man, and in particular you. The Haya is that revelation to will your existence. The Neshama is the will of your existence. And then the Ruach and the Nefesh crystallize itself into emotions and physicality. When a person taps into that Haya and Haya Yehida, essentially the Haya, which taps into the Yehida, the person elevates himself and basically taps into what we call the Nevuah, what we call the Ruach HaKodesh. The Neshama is what the Malbim, he agrees to the Rambam, is defined as the Da'at. The Da'at is the ability to foresee through clarity, through the Torah, through the Emet, the world and its behavior. And put everything back together and relate everything to a one purpose. Bring everything back to its origin. That's called the Neshama. The Haya Yehida is transcending, breaking to a level, to that level, and penetrate a level that is basically giving you a panoramic view of knowledge and of understanding that is beyond time and physicality and space. Says, based on that explanation, says the Malbim, there are two types. There are two types of spiritual influence. Hanitzanim nir'u ba'aretz. The nitzanim nir'u ba'aretz, the influence, the blossom. What is the blossom? Is, like we said, is the effort, the influence, the projection, right? The byproduct of an effort, of the rejuvenation of life, right? Life happens inside the earth, you don't see it, and it starts blossoming an effort, right? You start seeing the byproduct of an effort. That's what the definition of blossoming is the identification, right, of something that has happened that is being revealed for the first time. That's the blossom. And it's sanim nir'u ba'aretz. They are seen ba'aretz, in the earth. What is the earth? What is the eretz? The eretz is the physical world, right? And when we say the physical world, we don't mean physicality. We mean the dimension of physics and metaphysics, which include the nefesh, the ruach, and the neshama. So when the neshama works and elevates itself, although it goes to sleep, although there is a fall down, although there is a setback, however, you can see the blossom, you can see the byproduct, the side effect of that effort that seems to have disappeared. You can see that. Et azamir higia says, at that point, if you can tap into what you have invested in yourself, and you can tap into and see the byproduct of it, there is two ways to uplift yourself. Et hazamir higia, we said, is what? Is the time where we can sing, is the time where we are happy, right? It says at that point, you will awake yourself and be able to rejuvenate two kochot. One koach is, again, the neshama. Based on what the neshama has installed and built within you, it gives you the ability to rejuvenate that and refresh that koach. And that is based on what? On the sechel. It's basically, sometimes you have moments of clarity, then you're a little bit confused, and then you're down, and then you're not so motivated. But then suddenly you're like, wow, there was an effort. The effort was very, very beneficial. It left something good in me. That information was something that was of value. You know what? I want to start again and stimulate my sechel. I want it to be alive. I want to grow it. It's something, it's a koach, says the Balbim, that goes to sleep, that can be dormant, but that never really disappears. Your sechel, your intellect, your clarity is not something that disappears. It's something that's within you. It's just, is it activated or disactivated? But it's something that's within you. Says the Malbim that even when you are at times of anesthesia, times where you're dormant, right? If you can find that blossoming, if you can find that byproduct of that was born from your intellectual effort, it's a way to trigger once again et hazamirigia. So when from an emotional and an intellectual perspective, when a person is emotionally down, depressed, or intellectually empty or dormant, like you say, because that's really when he's comfortable intellectually and he doesn't need to stimulate his da'at. So for a person to trigger a rejuvenation, a koach, life again, he needs to acknowledge the positive outcome of that effort. If he can find the positive outcome of an effort, it naturally stimulates the nefesh and the ruach and the neshama, boom, to start being active again and proactive. By the way, this is it's one of the sources I use in the discovery program that we put together after many years of learning Torah Nefesh, which is what? Part of the work that we say is to focus on something specific and apply it for 40 days, whatever that's not for now, but and to actually create awareness of the positive outcome of your effort. When you do that, whether you want it or not, it stimulates your essence, your nefesh, to want to do more. One of the sources is this Malvi. However, he says, so that's Anitzanim Niru Ba'aretz. When you find that, et hazamir higia. It's a time of shira. It's a time of freedom. It's a time of more than blossoming. It's a time of growth. Et hazamir higia. But you need Anitzanim Niru Ba'aretz. You need to niru. You need to see the blossoming. You need to see the positive outcome. That comes from the neshama. Be'kol hatov, he says, if you're able to tap into your to your haya yehida, he said, that's not something that is consistent. These are moments in life where you have a tremendous revelation. And he brings the Sfarim HaKadoshim that says, Zacha yatir yahavin le nishmata. If you have the zechut to really work hard with your neshama, so the Chachmei Kabbalah say we give you more neshama. Kadosh Baruch Hu gives you more neshama. What is that extra neshama? That extra neshama is what we call the Haya Yehida. Is that influx of wisdom, of clarity that breaks all limitations. And this is the Nevuah, this is a Ruach HaKodesh. You go to a Talmid Chacham, to a Tzaddik, whatever, at the time of a Navi, to come, and he starts telling you everything. about the future, about Klal Israel, or this. He can see the past, he can see the future. Like we say about Adam Rishon, היה רואה מסוף העולם ועד סופו. He was able to see from one end of the world to the other. No limitations, no limitations. So says the Malbim, the more you free yourself from your limitations of the nefesh and the ruach to dedicate yourself to the neshama, the more the outcome is an invitation to an essence that is limitless. You have to keep in mind that we are in a dynamic that is very midah kedeged midah. What limits us? The nefesh and the ruach. The neshama essentially is not a limit, right? It's the telescope that allows you to see deep without any limitations of vision. So the more you break your limitations, the more you're invited in an essence that is limitless. Now, not all the time we break our limitations. This is just the nature of man, and it's okay. There is only one man that was fully limitless, which is Moshe Rabbeinu. Except for Moshe Rabbeinu, nobody else was fully limitless. The Rambam speaks about it in Masechet Sanhedrin, in his Pirush HaMishnayot. In the 13 attributes of Emunah, he explains the essence of Moshe. Moshe was fully limited. And says the Malbim, this is Nishma be'artzenu. At that point, the Kol HaTor Nishma be'artzenu is the call of the Torah, which is really the call of the Haya Yehidah, of the Torah, the call of the Torah, the call of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Nishma be'artzenu, is already being heard within our eretz, within our essence. No, it's no longer about Aretz, it's no longer about the Nefesh and the Ruach, it's about the Artzenu, it's about our entire essence. It's the unity of the Nefesh, the Ruach, the Neshama. And now comes a vision, comes a message, comes a connection that is beyond the Sechel. And he calls this today, that we don't have the Nevuah, he calls it today the Ruach HaKodesh. Ruach HaKodesh is this ability to tap into a level of Kedusha and messaging that is beyond the intellect. So here we'll learn a formula. What is the formula? Every positive effort that you do when you're on a high leaves a trace. This trace has for one of its purpose the responsibility to allow you to connect it, understand it, get a high from it, and rejuvenate the desire of a high. Recreate that high. Now, that's one thing. Now, depending on how free you want to be during that high, that spiritual high, and how much you're dedicated to that mission of emet, to that mission of dedication, this will identify whether or not, and if yes, how much of that Haya Yehida, of that spiritual incredible connection you will benefit. Good? Very, very systematic formula. And there is another level to it. Like we said in the beginning when we read the pasuk, this pasuk comes with the next pasuk. Ate'ena haneta fageha. Okay, the fig tree Haneta Pagea formed its little fig. You know, the first Pagea milashon pag. Pag is premature. A premature, you call him a pag. It's the first little, you know, when you start seeing in a fig tree, that first little green fig, that little green thing, right? This is Pagea. Ve'agefanim, and the vines, semadar natenu reach. Okay, the little raisins, when they grow, they give a beautiful smell. That's when you know that the raisin is being formed and it's starting. It's bishul. It's starting. The completion of its formation. It gives a smell. Kumilach ra'ayati yafati ulchilach. Stand up again. Ra'ayati, my beloved. Yafati, my beautiful. Ulchilach, and start the lech lecha, your journey. The Gaon breaks down the te'ena and the gefanim. It says the te'ena, the pagim, the te'ena is the Torah Kedosha, the Talmidei Chachamim. The pagim is the ones that start learning the Torah. They're pag, they're just starting, yeah? They're just tasting the Torah. But they're connected to the fig tree. They want the Torah. That Talmidei Chachamim that start. The Gefanim, the Gefen, it's the Baalei Mitzvot. And he brings Mishle that refers to the Talmidei Chachamim to figs versus he says the Baalei Mitzvot, people that do mitzvot but don't have Torah, to the vines. And he says, we know there are 4 types in the lulav, that 4 minim, and each min represents a different type of Jew, right? The etrog, we say, represents the Talmid Chacham that has Torah and mitzvot. The hadas has the reach, he has mitzvot, but he doesn't have ta'am, he doesn't have taste, which is Baalei mitzvot, but without Talmidei Chachamim. He says, you have 2 types of avodah to have the kumilach, to stand up. When you stand up on 2 legs. Going back to the fundamental, what he said, you have the te'ena, you have the Torah, but you also have the mitzvot. You need the Torah and you need the mitzvot. Now, the beauty, says Shlomo HaMelech, is that in order to stand up and start your journey, the ulchilach, he says, he doesn't say, hate'ena vehagefanim natnu reach. He doesn't talk about the tree with its full fruit. He says, the tree that starts blossoming its fruit. He says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in order to give you the strength to start your journey, needs from you, what you need is just the beginning of the Limut Torah, the pag, and all you need is the reach of the mitzvot, the beginning of the mitzvot. This mitzvah that gives a smell. What does it mean? It gives a smell. It starts creating around you a certain aura, a certain structure. You're not fully accomplished in the mitzvot, but it's starting. If you have that, says the Gaon, kumilach. Don't wait until you have all the Torah or all the mitzvot to stand up. It's enough to stand up. And you know why? Why can you stand up? Because you have ra'ayati and you have yafati. Because you have the zechut avot, and because you have your own abilities, right? Ra'ayati yafati. And with that, ulchilach. So now there is a completion to the formula, if you will. You need your Torah, limud Torah. You need your mitzvot, at least to start your Torah, to start your mitzvot. You need to believe in yourself and also respect the legacy of the Zechut Avot, of what has been given to you and basically passed on, and then then you can go. Very, very clear. Now, says the Gaon, we have to be careful. He says, if you have only one or the other on both level, on the level of your accomplishment or on the level of your own belief, that doesn't work. You need to be able to have all of it, including the Zechut Avot. Why? He says because the pasuk says Shomer HaBerid ad le'elef dor. HaKadosh Baruch Hu swore to protect and honor his vow, his covenant, 1,000 generations, which means you need that protection in order to be able to swim in your own sea. You cannot on your own. So it's a three-dimensional movement that needs to be constantly thought of and implemented in order to be able to to get to that kumila. The Malbim on Ateena Haneta Fagea Bagefanim Semadar Natnu Reach says something a little bit different. He says the following. He says, Hate'ena represents Chaneta Fagea. The Hate'ena represents the sechel, the intellect. He says the koach sechel and the bina is what allows you to create, to blossom ideas, just like the te'ena blossoms the little fig. Your sechel, your intellect, is what helps you create new ideas and bring to life something new. Not the chaya or the yechida or the spiritual high. The sechel is what creates not rejuvenate and bring to life something new. Atana haneta fagea. So you need to use your intellect not only to understand, but to create, to innovate and understand better and progress in your intellectual journey. And for that, you need the sechel and the bina, the intellect. And he says here, the difference of the Gaon, who applies the Gefen to the mitzvot. He says the Gefen, we know that the Yain across Shir HaShirim represents the Nevuah, right? We spoke about it many times. He says, he says, you don't have access to prophecy. We don't have access to prophecy. But we have its reach. we have its reach, we have its smell, we have the ability to get spiritually high. And he's saying all this is through what? He says this is applied through the sense of the reach, through the sensitivity of the smell. What does that mean? The smell, whether you want or not, when you're exposed to a smell, you smell it, right? You smell it. Now, whether a smell is going to uplift, and we know we discussed the power of smell, right? Depending on whether the smell is good or not, depends on what you're smelling, on what you're smelling. But your ability to smell is consistent. Says the Malbim, the same thing happens in spirituality. You have that ability to smell. The reach is there. The semadar, the influence of Ruach HaKodesh, of Kedusha, not of understanding only the Torah, but of the Kedusha of the Torah, of the Kedusha of the mitzvot. It's there. But you have to smell it. You have to smell it. If you are alive spiritually, you will smell it. And that smell, that desire, spiritual desire, brings you and elevates you and reveals to you different dimensions in your Torah, different dimensions in your understanding of the mitzvot that brings you to the kumilach ulchilach. So according to the Malbim, we have two different dimensions that allows you to progress in your spiritual journey. One of them is the intellectual ability to create and understand and progress. And the other is the ability to connect to the kedusha of what you're doing and what you're learning in Avodat Hashem, that uplifts you and brings you to a dimension of kumilach, not just from a systematic approach, but from a spiritual and emotional approach. Also, like he says again and again, to a level of ishakeni mineshikot pihu. It's not just a foreign thought. It's more of an intimate relationship and connection. This is the difference between the te'ena and the reyach of the semada. Any questions until now?
I have a question, but I don't know if it's for now. How is Haya and Hida with fundamentals? It's a new concept. But at least for me.
Yeah. So I speak about it, I think, in the fundamentals.
Yeah? Oh, I forgot it.
I think so, yes. I think I speak about it. What the Chaya and the Yehida, the roles they play in the nature of a person. It's almost, so to tap into the Chaya and Yehida, or to its influence, it's requiring not just an emotional connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not just an intellectual connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but a connection to what is called Kedusha. Kedusha, it's a level of respect that is not intellectual or spirit or emotional. And what it does is that a person that is kadosh, okay, does not allow physical limitation or emotional limitation or even intellectual limitation from his limitations from growing. Okay, so that's what we say. Somebody that dies al kiddush Hashem, is someone that breaks all the rules. He breaks the emotional fear. He breaks the physical fear. He breaks the intellectual fear, right? To rationalize and explain why you should be living. It's someone that breaks all these layers for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for Borei Olam. Now, we're not talking about a psychopath. We're not talking about somebody that's meshuga. We're talking about somebody that understands it so well and so deeply and is so immersed emotionally and intellectually in the Torah, in his relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he understands that there is a level that is worth connecting to and break break whatever limitations I have. The second you break that limitation, you tap into what is called the Hayah. The Hayah is the pipeline that brings the Yehidah, the Or of the Yehidah. What is the Yehidah? The Yehidah Mishon Yahid, one. It's that one. It's basically connecting to the original will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to create the world and humanity.
Okay.
If you can connect to that, and which is again extremely difficult, extremely rare, but if you have one moment of that connection, it shines a tremendous amount of power and of clarity and of and spiritual elevation. And this is basically that's where the Nevuah essentially came from those spark of Yehidah that shines into the Hayah, that gets translated into the Neshama, and etc.
Okay.
What is very interesting and I think amazing is that the Malbim, and very more than the Gaon, but also the Gaon bring, if you will, a version of that level to us, which is called, according to the Malbim, the Ruach HaKodesh. The Ruach HaKodesh. And that level is something that we need to believe we can achieve. We need to believe we can connect to the Hayah Yehidah. There is obviously a lot of work that needs to be done. Okay, it requires a lot of effort, but it is an avodah that can be done. And it is even asur to think that we're not, it's something that cannot be achieved. Because by saying that, basically what we're doing, we're already creating limitations when the whole purpose of life is to break the limitations. Good.
Good.
The Te'ena and the Gefanim, we brought those two dimensions. The Malbim now dives in and brings another layer to those two dimensions within the Neshama. We said that we have Nitzanim near Ubaretz et Azir Merigia v'Kolato. We then explain that there is the dimension of the Neshama versus the dimension of the Hayah Yehidah. Yes? But he says the Malbim, within the effort of the Neshama, there is efforts that will lead you to the Hayah Yehidah and others that won't. And he says the following. He says when a person is on a high, a person is on a spiritual high. We discussed the two spiritual highs, but now we're focusing on the spiritual of the Neshama, which is the consistent one, the one that you can tap into all the time. He says, what you learn, what you implement, and what you build during that time has two types of consolidation. You have one that is koach belo foal. It's a thought, it's an idea, it's definitely something that you compartmentalize in your brain and in your heart, but you never brought it to reality. You left it as a potential. So you have a potential growth, a growth that went from an idea to a real potential. So now you grew your potential, but it's still potential. It's still potential. He says that potential, he says it's you at times of winter and rain and blah, blah. These are not the potential you can count on to take you out of darkness. It's great, but it's like a seed that has been planted and stays in the winter. You don't see it. You don't know it's there. It's going to blossom at one point. Eventually, when you're on another high, when you're coming back, you will use that. But it's not something that's available. It's not cash on the table. It's okay, an investment you made and finish. It's not liquid, right? There's no liquidity. And he says there is the effort that you do during that high that translates not from a potential into a practical, into reality. Things that you have brought to your routine, it became yours. It became yours. That's it. It's part of you. It's part of you. Says the Malbim, these efforts that go from potential to reality and actually become part of you are like trees in the winter. Even though there's no fruit, you see it. You can point out, you point your finger at it and know that fruits are coming. It's not a seed, it's a tree. Says the Malbim something nifla meod. He says, man, we love when we're on a high, we love to create potential. We love it. More potential and more potential. But unfortunately, the Yetzer Hara stalls you when it's a potential. I say, it's a beautiful potential. Look, now your potential, your buying power grew tremendously, but you didn't buy anything. But it's there, so you feel good. So you sit back and you're like, Baruch Hashem, now I can go and buy. I have the potential. It says this is only good when times are good. When times are bad, you cannot go back and knock on the door of that investor or whatever, that line of credit, and say, hey, you know what? I want to draw that line. Mapitom, Habibi, it's winter. It's winter. Tough times. I gave it to you when it was sunny. That seed you had it when it was sunny. You planted it and nothing happened with it, so you have to wait. I'm sorry. Now no availabilities. It's deep in the earth. You have to wait. But if you use it, if you use it and you break that level of comfort, of satisfaction, says the Malbim, that's the layer you need to break in order to be able to be ready to tap into the Haya Yehida. Because when you break that layer and you go from potential to reality, that level of reality is another pipeline to the Haya Yehida. This is what it takes. It takes a lot of those trees in order to be able to tap into the Haya. And says the Malbim, this is what you need the Te'ena, but it's not enough. You need also the Reyah of the Semadar of the Gefanim. You need those two efforts. You need the potential. You need to be able to bring that potential, but you cannot stop there. You need to take that potential to the reality. And it's two different efforts. It's not one effort that goes from 0 to 100 to stop in 15. No, it's two different kochot. You have the koach to develop a potential, and you have another koach to bring that potential to reality. Two different kochot that require two different types of effort. It's not one effort from one to Z. It's the te'ena and the gefen. And this is what it takes for the kumilach. This is what it takes to the Ra'yati Yafati Ulchilach. Another very, very important dimension in the Avodah. Within the Neshama. This has nothing to do with the Chaya Yechida. We spoke about the influence of the Neshama versus the Chaya Yechida. Within the Neshama, we have those efforts. The acquirement of the potential, the leads, and then who brings those leads into reality? The closer, right? You have the sorcerer, and then you have the closer.
The creative and the executor.
Yeah, exactly. Two different kochot. But kochot we need in order to build this momentum, this pipeline that will allow us essentially to tap into the Chaya Yechida. If not, we stay at the Neshama, which is great. But it's not Chaya Yechida. It's not Chaya Yechida.
Rav, if I took this example and brought it to a very, very mundane level, just to make sure I understand the concept, it would be, as an example, people who go to a shiur, so, oh, wow, amazing, they feel that high, and then they go home and everything is the same. That would be type A. And then there's the person who
I'm
goes...
not even sure if it's type A. Huh? I think it's introduction to type A. I think
Okay.
a lot of people, they hear something beautiful, and after an hour, they completely forgot that they didn't even turn it into a potential. But let's say
Right. It's someone that had ideas of how they could change, but just didn't execute on it.
Yeah.
And then the type B would be the person who goes to the shiur and uses that high as inspiration to execute on the concepts and the growth that he needs in his life.
Correct. And the beauty is what? Let's not forget. The cherry on the cake is that we're talking about the hanta. We're talking about the blossoming, about the reach. We're not even talking about the full grapes or about the fig that is fully ready. We're talking about the blossoming of it. That's all it takes.
And if you're able to materialize, it acts as a bridge between your moments of high to get you from...
Exactly. And the more of that high you have, of crystallization and reality, and the more you are ready for the Chaya Yechida.
Does it shorten the we spoke about the peaks and the troughs. Does it shorten the periods?
Yes, absolutely. Good.
Beautiful.
Good.
Beautiful, Rav. Very nice.
Baruch Hashem. So now we finished Pasuk Yud Gimel. Be'ezrat Hashem.
Thank you so much, Rav.
Thank you, Rav.
כל הצדיקים שוכני עפר ולרפואה שלמה לכל חולי עם ישראל.
Amen.
Amen. Have a good day, everybody.
בשורות טובות.
Love you.
Love you all.